Hi everyone, so this is going to be about our Pythagorean Theorem lesson this week. I'm not going to show the video right now, you guys can do that on your own, but it is really cool to look at. It explains why the Pythagorean Theorem is the way that it is and why that the equation actually does work. So if you want to go ahead and do that at some point on your own. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared is going to be the equation that we are focusing on for this lesson. Okay, so I want you to please be very aware that Pythagorean theorem only works for right triangles. So over here on the left, I have a hippo. He's on the diagonal, and I have the A is the vertical line or the altitude. So similar to when we talk about a plane being 10,000 feet up in the sky or 20,000 feet, we're talking about how far it is away from the Earth's surface, how high up it is. So that's my vertical line, my altitude. Across the bottom is the base. So that's just the base of the triangle, the horizontal line. And then I have the hypotenuse, which is the vertical line. So when we are talking about our equation, we've labeled these as A, B, and C. So A, meaning my altitude, B, meaning my base, and C, my hypotenuse. Be careful, we do not use H. So I want to look at this triangle on the right-hand side to see what numbers are what. We're going to label this. So A for altitude, well, 12 is going up and down. That's my vertical line, my vertical side. So 12 is going to be my A. If I look over at my answer choices, I have 12 here and I have 12 here. So now we need to differentiate what the B and the hypotenuse is. So I look at the 5 on the bottom and I look over at my other triangle. Well, B is the base. That's that horizontal line. So B is going to be 5. So then C would be 13, and we look, and that's my diagonal line, so that is my hypotenuse. So that is perfect. So this is the introduction to the equation. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So that's altitude, base, and our hypotenuse. So here we have the numbers labeled for us. So we're just going to pop them right into that equation and substitute in. So A we said was 2, so I'm going to have 2 squared plus B we said is 3, so I have 3 squared equals C squared. Make sure you keep that squared. That is very important. So remember when we're doing squares, it is 2 times 2, 3 times 3. Don't just do 3 times 2 because you will get the wrong answer. So 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, C squared here. Now I can just simply add. So I have 4 plus 9, and that equals 13, equals C squared. Well, now I have this problem because I need C by itself, and right now it is saying C squared, or C times C. So in order to get C all by itself, I need to take the square root. So in order for us to do that, you will need a calculator because this is not something that we would know what the square root of 13 would be. So we're going to do this. And I'm going to do the square root of 13 in my calculator. And I'm going to get 3.605. And it says to round to the nearest tenth. Well, what's in my tenths place right now is the 6. I look over to the 0. Remember, 4 and below, let it go. 5 and above, give it a shove. So my final answer here is just going to be 3.6. So 3 6/10, and I would like you to label that it is meters. All right, moving to the next one. So now we have a triangle, and we need to label our triangles. Remember, A is my altitude, B is my base, C is my hypotenuse. A squared, well, we just said was 8. So I'm going to have 8 squared here plus 10 squared equals, we don't know what C is, and we're going to solve for that. 8 squared, 8 times 8, 64, plus 10 squared, 10 times 10 is 100, equals C squared. I can simply just add. So I have 64 plus 100, which is 164, equals C squared. I then need to take the square root. Taking the square root of 164, is 12.80. So again, round to the nearest tenth. Well, 8's in my tenths place, 0 is next door. I am just going to keep it at 12.8 and label meters. So that would be what my hypotenuse would be. All right, next one. So A, altitude, B, base, C, hypotenuse. Make sure you label, it will help you so much. A, we said was 9, so I have 9 squared plus B, we said was 11. 11 squared equals C squared. 9 squared, 9 times 9, 81. 11 squared, 11 times 11, 121 equals C squared. 81 plus 121 is 202 equals C squared. Take my square root, that's my last step. C is going to be 14.21, round to the nearest tenth. I look at the 2, I look next door, 4 and below, you let it go. So it's just going to be 14.2, 14 and 2 tenths meters. Now this time I haven't given you a triangle. If you want to draw one, you can to help you out. Remember, this is A, B, and C. A, we said, was 7 squared. B is 8. C squared, because we don't know what that is. So 7 squared, 7 times 7, 49. 8 squared, 8 times 8, 64, equals C squared. So if I have 49 plus 64, it's going to equal 113. And then from there, I'm going to take the square root. And this is going to equal C equals 10.63. We round to the nearest tenth. I look at the 6, look next door to the 3, 4 and below, let it go. So my final answer here is going to be 10 6/10 meters. All right, so if you look here, if I label my triangle A, B, and C, in the last few problems, we've been missing letter C. We've been given A and B. So now it's going to look a little bit different. So in the last couple problems, we've been adding numbers together in order to solve for the missing side. Now, because we're missing something on the left-hand side of the equation, we're going to have to subtract, and it's going to look like this. So A, we don't know right now, so I'm going to keep A squared. B is 6, so I have 6 squared equals C. We now have a number, so it's going to be 12 squared. So I'm going to keep A squared. I can't do anything with that right now. 6 squared, 6 times 6, 36. 12 squared, 12 times 12, 144. So now, instead of adding these together, I can't do that because I have A squared. That's a variable. It's not going to work. So in order to get A squared by itself, I can subtract 36 from both sides. So when I do that, my 36's go away. I'm left with my A squared equals 144 minus 36 equals 108. Then take the square root, take the square root. A equals the square root of 108, which is 10.39. Now remember, we are rounding to the nearest tenth. The 3 is in the tenths place. I look next door to the 9. 5 above, give it a shove. So I need to bump that 3 up to a 4. So my final answer will be 10 4/10 meters long. We're going to practice a few more of those. So here I'm missing A again. So I'm going to have A squared plus, well, B is 14, so 14 squared equals 28 squared. 14 times 14, and I am using a calculator for this, guys, so please, if you need to grab one, use your phone. I will also be including a link to a calculator so you can easily do the square roots as well. So I'll have A squared plus 14 squared is 196 equals 28 squared equals 784. So just like we did in the last problem, I can't combine these. I have a variable. Nothing's going to give me anything here. Not going to work. So I'm going to subtract 196, subtract 196. These go away. I'm left with a squared on the left-hand side. I have 784 minus 196, which is 588. From there, I can take the square root, just like we've done in all these other problems. And I'm going to write it onto the side here because I've run out of room. So I have a equals 24 done 24. So, and that will be my answer. So I round to the nearest tenth. The 2 is in the tenths place. I look to the 4. The 4 tells me to let it go. So my answer is going to be 24.2 m. Now, if we were to draw that triangle, let me draw it here. So A, this would have been 24.2. This would have been the 14, and this would have been the 28. Just to give you the visual. All right. So same thing now, I'm missing B. We don't know what B is. So I'm going to label, oops. So a squared we said is 4. 4 squared plus, we don't know B, so we're just going to leave it as B squared. C is 6. So I have 6 squared. So 4 squared, 4 times 4 is 16, plus B squared equals 6 squared, 6 times 6, 36. Now, last time we were missing A. I can't do 16 plus B squared. We have no idea what B is. I can't add anything. So, because 16 is positive, I can subtract it, just like we did when we were missing A. 16's go away. I'm left with B squared equals 36 minus 16 gives me 20. Take the square root. Take the square root. B is equal to, take the, 20, take the square root, 4.47. Again, we're rounding to the nearest tenth. So 4 is currently in my tenths place. I look next door to the 7. The 7 tells me to give it a shove. So my final answer is going to be 4 5/10 meters. Again, we want to label A, B, C. A is missing. So I have A squared plus, well, what's B? B we said is 5. B squared equals C squared, which is 7. A squared, can't do anything to it yet. That looks more like a 9. Sorry, guys. We said 5 squared, 5 times 5, 25. 7 squared, 7 times 7, 49. I can't add these together because there's a variable. So if I can't add it, I have to subtract it. (49) minus 25 equals 24. So I have A squared equals 24. Take the square root. A is equal to 4.89. So I look at the 8 because that's in the tenths place. I look next door to the 9. The 9 tells me to give it a shove. So I went 4.9. Okay. All right, so label A, B, C. We are missing B. So A squared is 20. We don't know B. C is 35. So I have 20 times 20 equals 400. 35 times 35 equals 1,225. So you need to ask yourself, can I add these together? No, I can't. There's a variable. So that means I have to subtract. So 1,225 minus 400 gives me 825. I take the square root, take the square root. B is equal to 28.72. So remember, I look at the 7, I look next door to the 2. The 2 tells me to let it go. So I'm going to have 28.7 meters. That will be my final answer for B. All right, last thing, we just have a little test of vocabulary. So I'm going to pull all my vocab words to the top. So I have right angles, I have the formula, I have square rooting, and I have hypotenuse. So my other 4 things are definitions. So if I look at right angles, what type of triangle is the Pythagorean used for? Only for right triangles. It has to have a right angle. This, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, is a formula. That is the Pythagorean theorem formula. Square rooting is the opposite of squaring a number. So if I squared a number, the way I can find the root of it is by square rooting. And last, the hypotenuse is the longest side of the triangle.